Ja, herzlichen Dank, Herr Russwurm. Wir sind zum Erfolg verdammt. We are doomed to succeed. Could be a fine motto to our conference as well. And it increases the pressure on all of us on stage just a little bit. Gökçe Mete will take over in a second from me. Just one technical note from my part at this point. We want all of you to have a part in this, and we collect mood pictures from you every once and then. And to do so, we use Slido. To participate, you can go on slido.com and put in the hashtag Klimapfade, or you can scan the QR code right behind me. And now I'd like to introduce Gökçe Mete. She works at South Pole. It's a consultancy with focus on emission reduction, and Gökçe is global lead in heavy industry transition. So that's just the expertise we need here at our industry conference. Welcome, and now the floor is yours and your panel, Gökçe.
Thanks a lot, Inga. Well, hi everyone, and welcome. So we are going to have our first panel. So I'd like to first invite our speakers to the panel, to the stage. I will take a seat, and we are going to actually now already start with Slido. I will, of course, introduce the panel, but I wanted to gain some time by already asking you a few questions to get your also thoughts and participation in this. So you can see, I guess you can see how to connect to a Slido already on the screen. If you could please log in. We have our first question, you see it on the stage as well. So, of course, in line with the theme of the conference, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Are we on the right track to accelerate the progress towards climate neutrality and value creation? So you have options there. Yeah, you can choose one of them. We will, of course, come back to that. And we will have another Slido opportunity. And there we will have another option to actually put in word cloud. But we can start here now, and then we will move on. So as you start typing your options, I will now turn to the panel and introduce them. So here we have, to the far right, Christoph Bals. He's Policy Director of German Watch. Next to him, we have Dr. Wibke Lücke, founder and manager of WEW, and we'll hear more about the, of course, your work and the company that you co-founded, And we have also Vinod Philip. He's a member of executive board at Siemens Energy, and we have with us Dr. Bridget Knopf, Secretary General of Mercator Research Institute on Global Commons and Climate Change. So very, very diverse panel. I'm very thrilled to be here and have this conversation with you. So what we'll do, I suggest that we start with some general questions that I prepared for you. And again, let's stay with the dilemmas and questions here. I'm going to ask about climate action and prosperity. And how do you see the two related? Do you really think we can reach both at the same time? Maybe since we started from that end for introductions, we will start with you for this question. Do you think we can achieve both?
We have to achieve both, of course, because otherwise, I mean, it's a useless game. And I think in the whole debate, what we often forget, that climate change mitigation is not an end in itself, but it is because climate impacts are becoming more and more visible, and also in the next years we have to face more and more climate impacts. And so therefore I really see the need for climate change mitigation, and I think definitely climate change mitigation is the way to foster prosperity, to ensure our prosperity also for the future. So therefore I see that it has to go hand in hand, and we have to find clever solutions where this fits in both directions.
Yeah, thanks for a brief but sharp and clear answer. What do you think, Vinod?
Yeah, for me, it's also very clear. It's not an either or, it's an and. From a opportunity perspective, I think it also creates the sort of tension that can be essential for innovative solutions, to find ways that drive prosperity while also making sure that we do this in increasingly resource-mindful ways and ways that also look to the benefit of the planet. Because we should not forget that even today, there are almost 800 million people in the world who have no access to electricity. So it is absolutely essential, while we work towards a greener future, we need to make sure that we have the right sort of innovative approaches and solutions in place, that the almost 1 billion people today also should be taken into consideration. So I do believe it is not an either or, but an and.
Well noted.
From my point of view, I would say, unfortunately, climate protection and prosperity is not related at the moment, although it could be. But what is closely related is greenhouse gas emissions and prosperity. Yeah? If you look at the energy demand per capita globally, you can clearly see that the richest countries of the world have the highest energy demand per capita, and therefore also the highest CO2 emissions. And although these countries have a lot of technological solutions for saving energy, till now we have not been successful in decoupling the energy demand from the standard of living. So I think that these countries have a lot of technological solutions and they have a lot of money, and the prerequisites are great, but I think we have to be very, very fast to implement really climate action, so that we can say that these two words, prosperity and climate action, are really related to each other, and at the moment it's not, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree that decoupling of economic growth and the emissions, it's not an easy one. There's a whole lot of literature around it, of course. And how about yourself, Christoph?
Yes, I think from a scientific point of view, also from a legal point of view, it's very clear, without really stringent climate protection, we will have no prosperity, all of us. And this is so obvious. If we see already now how the number of people hungry increases again. We see already now how the debt crisis in the world, about 100 countries in the world are overwhelmed with debt. And the climate crisis is a good part of this, which drives this already now. And to think that we can have a solution without this there is no way. But on the other hand, the transformation is not incremental environmental policy. It's really transformational, and this means it moves a lot of us out of our comfort zone. So it's not an easy thing to do, and we can organize this, but we also have to organize it in a way that the poorer half of the population doesn't lose by this, and we can organize it in a way that it even wins, and that's the challenge.
Very insightful and quite complimentary. I would like to now get back the other Slido question to the screen if we can. We're going to come to your answers, but I wanted to continue with another question to the audience, since you've been very active in responding to the first question. Let's ask, again, we're using Slido, what do you think are the obstacles on the path to climate change, on the path to climate neutral future and, of course, prosperity? So what do you think are the obstacles on our path? This is a word cloud, so you can actually put in as many words as you want. And while you start with that, I would like to ask also you why it is so hard to do the obvious. And the obvious is to team up. Of course, it takes many to tango in this case. The climate change, the burden, will come into the details of this, of course, today. It has to be shared across society. We need to team up. So it seems obvious, but it's actually proven to be difficult. So why do you think it's so hard? I wanted to also ask you and get your insights. Maybe we can do it again the same order.
So why is it too hard? I would say there are two answers. So one is we have reaped the low-hanging fruits already, right? We have gained we have reaped the efficiency gains. This has come to an end. So the first 10 or 20% of emission reduction, that's quite easy, right? It comes with a benefit. Now we are entering the hard-to-abate sectors. So, and these are on the side of for society, it's on the transport sector and on the building sector. I mean, in Germany, we have experienced a very hard debate this year on our own heating cellar and which kind of heating are we using. So this really comes near to the people. And also in the transport sector, right? If you have to change your mode of transport, it's very much on your day-to-day habits. And it really affects people very much on the ground. So this is, I think, one part of the difficult story. And, well, 2 years ago, I would have said, well, we just need the state to set some rules, the government to set a high carbon price, and then the high carbon price will do the job. But it's not any longer the case, because we need people to get on board. We need people to change their habits. And this is always a back and forth. So you mustn't overburden the people, but you really need them to also go the way along the way, right? To go the way on the change pathway. In the other difficult, hard-to-abate sector, or it's probably industry, right? So this is why you're all sitting here. And I think here we have the additional difficulty now. We had the Corona times, and I remember Siegfried Russwurm 2 or 3 years ago making very strong point, we keep to the targets. Now what I hear from you, it's much more skeptical, and I fully understand that, because we are facing the time of the energy price crisis, right? So energy prices have changed dramatically since the last 2 years, and so the question is now, what is the business model for the future? And everything you have laid out is exactly why it is so hard. And I think the core is because probably we will see losers, but we will also see winners. And the question is, who wins the transformational game, right? Who will be in the position to have a business model in 10 years' time? And this is now the hard road. So these are two ways to see it, where I see the obstacle and the main difficulties in this transformation now.
Yeah, I think you touched upon very important points, and also with many of the heavy industries, we need those products. I mean, there are few things we can phase out, but things like steel, it's very clear that we will need them, and that's where it gets harder, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I just want to build on the comment made by Brigitte. I think so I kind of group it into three buckets. I think the first bucket was around behavior. So everybody is open to change as long as the other person is changing, right? And that will not work. So I think in order for common ground to be found, individual behaviors have to start to change, and which will come with discomfort. I think the second piece is also what was mentioned, winners and losers, because as you start this process at the beginning, there will be a bit of inequality as a starting point, and then you have to overcome that, which would mean that there will have to be some sort of a shifting from a win-lose to a win-win, and this doesn't always happen that organically. And I think the third piece is the absence of triggering events. Every time there is a triggering event, like the war of aggression in Ukraine, it triggers a certain alignment of agendas. But in the absence of triggering events, it's like this frog in hot water. It just keeps boiling and boiling and no action is taken. So I think we have to find a way to create the right triggering events, the triggering mechanisms, that get people to want to really do the obvious in terms of collaborating between governments, startups, universities, NGOs, large corporations. To get this ecosystem to work, you need the right sort of triggering events.
Yeah, I think what you said, especially in the last point, I mean, the just transition angle, absolutely crucial. But I think the cooperation across the value chain, across the actors of the society is key. I would love to hear more from all of you on this. I worked for several years in Sweden, so there was always the saying, partnership is the new leadership. In the context of climate change, I really believe that myself too. Yeah, let's also, yeah, I would love to hear from your experiences some examples of that as well. But first, let's hear your perhaps words on why it's so hard to do the obvious.
Okay, so I think a lot of points have already been mentioned, but I think most obvious is that there are massive different interests in the topic of climate change or climate neutral value creation at the moment. And this is also very clear when you look, for example, I'm coming from the hydrogen business, when you look on the hydrogen roadmap, for example, which has just been renewed by the German government. We know in this case, especially in the hydrogen case, that the business cases in Germany are quite difficult and that we need to import green hydrogen in the future. And when we want to talk about even the question who gets the hydrogen first is so difficult for us to solve at the moment, because on the one hand side there are people who say it needs to go to the companies who save the most CO2 emissions. The companies say we have to create value and we have to change our business, we have to be climate neutral. So there are totally different interests at the moment coming from each and every different sector. And what it makes it even more difficult is that it is totally anchored in the mindset of a lot of people that this energy transition will cost them something. Yeah? And this is true when you look on the monetary terms, but I think it's a no-regret decision which we have to make, because if we look on our future generations. And I think this is the difficulty which we are in at the moment, the different interests which we have, and that it has still a negative connotation in the mindset of a lot of people.
Yeah, it's triggering another question, but we'll give you the word as well, Christoph, on this one.
Yes, I want to say two things there. One is, if we are doomed to success, and then we all should play our role to make it happen. The governments to set the right framework and to support where it's necessary, and the finance sector to invest and to overcome the short-term perspective, the tragedy of horizon of the investment sector, the new business models of the business sector, and a civil society which doesn't say no but says hurry up. That's what we need. But then we also should see what we have to do is to get rid of fossil fuels until the mid of the century globally at the moment. Only then we have a chance to stay below the targets of the Paris Agreement. There is no other way. And this was where our all prosperity model was built on, and our habits were built on. And so this has to be transformed now at the moment. So it's, from my perspective, absolutely clear that this is not a smooth process just. And now to see what kind of regulation is accepted, to say, yes, if it is accepted, if all have to do their thing and not just a few, if it is not too expensive, and if it is effective. Those are the three design features which have to be met there in this case. And then we can get far more acceptance. And of course, we could go now into details what this means, but that's the general perspective from me there.
Yeah, this all triggered another question, but I want to actually, I'll ask that, but I want to bring the second question up on the screen, so all of you now have typed. So we can have it on the screen and have a look at what you think are the obstacles. And as that comes to the screen, we can just have a quick look. We've been seeing it here, so it's more for you. But I want to ask the speakers, Christoph, you mentioned that, different roles that each actor needs to play, but then one wonders who should take the lead. I worked in different country contexts with a narrow view of few industries. When I worked in India, it was mainly the businesses were a lot more proactive, wanting more from the state, they were more progressive in terms of innovation and climate change and technology. When I worked in the context of Korea, it was the opposite. All the businesses were just waiting for the state to decide on anything. So it makes me think, what do you think in the context of Germany or Europe, because we are very well connected in this whole ambition, especially the EU ambition. Who do you think should lead? And maybe we start this time from you, Vinod, because you've been smiling at me and nodding. I think they're good contributions, and if you can also reference some of the obstacles.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the word cloud, I think the few things that stand out for me, is there's something on dogmatism and ideology and all that. So it's a very good reflection of also some of my thoughts. I think coming back to your question, so maybe just for the audience, so I spent my first 20 years in India, then I spent my next 18 years in the US, and now I've spent my last 9 years in Germany. So I have seen 3 very different worlds. And to your point, I think depending on where you are, there is a certain part of the stakeholder network that takes action. From what I have seen in Germany, and now this is just my view that may or may not be reflective of what all of you think, but I do think that given the nature of how society is structured here, I think regulation will be important to lead the way. Coming from India, and I can say this, is that the joke is India is successful in spite of the system, not because of the system. So I think we have to be mindful of what is really kind of working, and knowing the system over here. I think if we can get the right regulations in place, then I think people are quite good at scaling up and following certain things. I don't see the same sort of entrepreneurial spirit in Germany that I see in the US, where if you have gone bankrupt 3 times, that's a sign of honor in the US. Over here, I think there is a fear of failure. So we have to respect that. It's not good or bad. We have to respect that and work within that framework. So I think in the US, a lot of it is entrepreneurial drive coming from a lot of different individuals. In India, it is from a lot of these large conglomerates that are mostly family run with a lot of dynastic principles, and they think about legacy. And I think in Germany, whether we like it or not, we have to work from the place of regulations.
I think now I'm going to turn to Wipke, because we've heard about entrepreneurial spirit as well, and you are an entrepreneur yourself. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I totally agree with you. When you failed 3 times, or it's a failure in Germany if you are bankrupt 3 times and working or founding a startup, I can totally tell you that it's difficult to find investors who believe in you when you do that. So I tend not to do it. Coming to the different roles which are needed maybe to overcome the obstacles, I think there are a few which are needed and a few topics which we already see over there. Yeah, I think first of all, from my point of view, speed is necessary in this topic. We have to be very fast during the next years if we want to have a leading role in climate protection, and if we want to save at least our industry and then our economy, and play an important role in these in the topic of climate actions and value creations in Germany. I think essentially are 3 points for that. Regulatory framework, so we need politics for this, not only the German politics but also the EU, which is the basis for investments.
Yeah? We see a lack of investments in climate protection and climate value creation over the last years because the regulatory framework was not set. This was also the reason why a lot of companies went abroad and didn't invest in Germany anymore. And we have to have a suitable incentive program or system, because at the moment, as already mentioned, it's quite difficult to have a business case in all of these clean technologies, especially in Germany. As we all know, we have very high electricity prices and a lot of companies are suffering from it. Yeah? So, and I think these are the three main points which we have to talk about. And these are all different legal entities who have to work on these different points. So this means it cannot be industry driven alone. It has to be accompanied by politics, because otherwise it's not feasible.
Yes, I agree. But Christoph, do you think there's a clear lead, or do you agree that it's not that easy?
Yes, I would maybe even say the most important actor is the civil society. If you look, what kind of the European Green Deal, we wouldn't have got this without Fridays for Future. The Inflation Reduction Act in the US, this wouldn't have happened without the civil society and the pressure of the civil society. Of course, based on this, then we need all of the things you have said. But I think without the driving force of civil society, we will not move forward. And there, at the moment, we have also a problem that some actions of civil society are not perceived as very constructive. And so we have to see how we can organize the constructive part of civil society in a way that drives the society in a constructive way, and that's our own challenge.
No, I agree. Civil society plays an important role, especially in awakening like young people. It's been very crucial, the Greta movement. I think it's incredible how young people now demand more from all of us. And last word, but not least for you.
I would see it as an interplay between government and civil society and also industry or business. And I think what was also on the slide here is, and you said it, the lack of regulation. I think it's important that the government sets the rules and sets a clear architecture. And I think we see this at the EU level with the Green Deal. I think there is a much clearer architecture than we currently have, for example, in Germany, because it sets the one emission trading scheme for power and industry, and then a second one for buildings and transport, perhaps a third one for land use, forestry, and so on. So I think the architecture and the rules should be clear. But what I would also like to see is a kind of upward spiral process, because there are always companies moving forward. For example, companies are testing an internal carbon price, or companies testing internal reporting schemes. And those companies will be the front runners, and they should then ask for even more regulation, or stronger regulation, more a better architecture, and so that we have an upward spiral, or as we have it at the global level with this ratcheting up mechanism. And I think so. Therefore, I always see it as a kind of interplay. So government can only do when there are front runners that call for that kind of action. So. Yeah, this is the way how I see it.
Yeah, that's a very good answer, very balanced, and yeah, I fully agree with you here. We've already seen the answer. We've seen the results of the first question, and I wanted to come back to it. I think it's about time now. Let's go to the first question. If we can have that one to the stage, where we ask you if we are on the right track. Should we panic? So let's get your answer, and of course then ask you. If you think we're on the right track are we progressing for climate neutrality or value creation? How is your feeling? And here I think it would be nice if you also reflect a little bit on Germany. We have, I think quite a lot of German audience. Would be good to hear from you, Germany, and also sort of globally. Maybe we go straight forward again from this line.
Well, I mean, currently we are not on track on meeting our 2030 targets, right? And I think what is the problem here? So I said before, we are entering the hard to abate or more difficult to abate sectors. But the other point is also that perhaps we concentrate too much on building up the new things, right? Building up renewables. That's always nice, also for politicians. Ramping up wind and solar, what is absolutely necessary, of course. But we also have to address the two other fields, and one is how to decarbonize and how to, in the building sector, how to get rid of the old heating systems, or also in the car with a fossil combustion engine, right? So these are the difficult things. So we cannot just put new electric vehicles on the street, so we will not decarbonize our transport sector. So, and the third aspect is what we discussed before, is the demand side, is how are people using electricity and energy. For example, the flats are getting bigger and bigger, and of course you need more heating space, so or heating energy. So I think to address all 3 points, that would be really important. What we also say, I'm also a member of Germany's Council of Experts on Climate Change, and what we say or what we acknowledge is that it will be really difficult to reach the 2030 targets, but that we need a better dialogue also on the conflicting issues, right? It will be hard, there will be conflicts, there will be trade-offs, but to address them also. Currently, I have the feeling that people say, well, we stick to the targets, but do less ambitious policies. And this will not work out, right? So we really have to say then, okay, these are the conflicts and we're going in that direction. Now, and also, we have conflicts about financing issues and so on. If we have, if we give money for the Industriestrompreis, we will probably won't have money for compensate poorer households. So we are running into several conflicts, right? And I think we need a more transparent and open process to address these issues.
Thanks, Bridget. And I have to say, as you spoke, yes, percentage has been increasing, so thanks a lot for also showing some of the progress. And I have to say, when we started, I was seeing the answers, we started with 50% no. So this is getting a little bit better, at least in the room. So Vinod, what do you think?
Yeah, so we did a similar exercise globally. And the interesting thing was, depending on the region, there was a higher level of optimism or a higher level of pessimism. And interestingly, in Asia, because of their starting point being quite different, they were a lot more optimistic about how things are moving. In Europe, there is a lot more pessimism. In the US, there is a lot more optimism. The Middle East is somewhere in the middle, literally speaking. So I think, first of all, we have to take, so from a global perspective, I see that it very much depends on what your starting point is. And I think that from a Siemens Energy point of view, we also try to make a few things very clear. That one is, there is no one energy transition that can be black and white applied across the board, because it very much depends on starting point. Number two, there is no single silver bullet that will solve it all. So, and then I think what we look at, so if I look at the question specifically, are we on the right track to accelerate the progress? I would say yes. Is that acceleration high enough? I would say no. And the last thing I would say is, from our perspective, I just want to make this very clear. There are 5 things that we have to do almost simultaneously to make sure that this climate neutrality happens along with value creation. One is what Birgit already talked about, expanding renewables, no question about it. I think the next biggest challenge for us is to make sure that the grid, the expansion, the modernization, and the upgrade of the grid infrastructure is going to be the next biggest challenge. If we don't fix that, everything else falls apart. Number 3 is we have to use the existing infrastructure as a bridge. We cannot have hundreds of trillions of infrastructure becoming stranded. It will not lead to prosperity. Number 4, there is tremendous opportunity in the existing infrastructure, especially in the hard-to-abate industries, to drive up efficiencies and to drive down emissions with a lot of introduction of technologies that are already available today, but have to be driven into the infrastructure. And the last is, if Europe is serious about this topic, they have got to reinvest in supply chain, manufacturing, and materials that will then help all of this happen. I think these are the 5 things we need to tackle. So we are on the right track, not fast enough, but I am optimistic about it.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think, yeah, I like that you all clarify a number of areas. We have to definitely collect them and, yeah, make sure it's heard widely. And on the grid, it's crucial. There's no transition without transmission, so we have to absolutely do that. Wipke, I would like to hear your views on this, but also on the, Bridget mentioned about EU targets, the 2030 target that is hard to reach. Well, yeah, there are difficulties in reaching that. I want to hear from you also on the hydrogen targets that the EU has and Germany has. Yeah, and do you think we're on the right track?
So I can totally understand why the answers were so pessimistic, because I think in Germany we started quite strong. In June 2020 we published our hydrogen strategy, and we did a lot of studies on how much hydrogen we need. Unfortunately, all of them were normative, and not a lot of discussion were done together with the industries, and I think the numbers are too low. I think the actual demand is much higher than we would expect, not only in Germany but also in the EU Commission. Yeah? What we are totally lacking is building up a roadmap on how to implement these technologies. Yeah? So if you look into the new published hydrogen strategy of Germany, you see that the funding of the 10 gigawatt goal of our chancellor will be 1.5%. Or 1.5 gigawatt will be funded by the European projects of, or the international projects of common European interest, and the rest is not clear. So 8.5 gigawatt of investment is not clear. We don't know who should build up the technology. We are not sure where to implement it, and we are for sure not sure where the energy comes from and who will receive the hydrogen we want to produce. So we clearly need roadmaps on how to implement, and we have to see where the money should come from. Yeah? And so as you mentioned, the goal for 2030, is it still feasible to achieve it in the hydrogen business for Germany? I would say no, because first of all, if we want to do it with small projects, we have to have a lot of these projects, and the regulatory framework is not clear at the moment. We have in the field of regulatory framework, we need around about 24 months for getting the approval of the government for rectifying such a plant. And if you're looking into bigger plants, for example 5 to 10 gigawatt plants, we need normally from the feasibility study to the final investment decision, building up the technology and start of production, we need around about 5 to 8 years. So we have to start today if we want to achieve the 2030 goal. And so I totally understand why a lot of people are so pessimistic, because at the moment we are the leading country in building water electrolysis plants, but we are losing very, very fast against the Asian market, which is very fast at the moment and is coming with offers which are well below the prices of the German market. And so we have to speed up if we really want to achieve the goal till 2030.
Yeah, thanks, Wipke. I think this is in line with what we discussed in the break. I was asking them, should we panic? And you said we have to be alarmed, and this is really alarming, the developments in Asia. And for sure permitting, we could have another hour on this. For last words, and again, I would love to hear from your perspective on Germany in particular. Are we on the right track?
Yes, I think it's very interesting to look back about 5 years. There, the industry had more or less the message to say, we are the front runner and the others can't even see us. So it was really the impression we are the leading country in climate things to move forward. Today, we are in a totally different situation. That the same actors say, look, the US is much faster, they have better framework conditions, China is moving rapidly, India is moving towards a solar revolution, and so on. And let's say from a global perspective, that's very positive, that we have this dynamics going on in the world at the moment. And now, after those different crises, and this was quite a challenge to come over the last year with the energy crisis and the corona crisis before, and now this is our joint challenge, to be up to the speed and to make this happen. And I think looking to the building up of renewable energies, far faster than 2 years ago. It's really a paradigm change. Now with the grids, it's just beginning to happen. The last 2 months were very progressive and successful in this regard, but much more has to happen. And also the other infrastructure, it's not only the electricity grids. So I think we should also see what is positively happening and trying to improve on this, and that we have to speed up. That is what at the moment our Chancellor, all opposition parties say, and they have to come together now in the next 3 months to really make this happen. And we should create the pressure for moving this forward.
Well, thanks a lot. Time is up. I had so many more questions. I'm upset we don't have time for this all, but it was great to hear such sobering answers and really balanced answers from such a diverse panel. I'm sure in the next panels and the day following, you'll delve much more deep into that. But I want to thank you. It was a pleasure. I hope you all enjoyed it too.
Well, thank you, Gökçe. Thank you to the panelists for giving us the broader picture